So what we've been talking about is looking at the Buddha's assessment of the universe, basically. Remember, Buddha's not a creator. So therefore he's either some wacko guy who's had a dream or a vision, which is how we think of spiritual anyway, and kind of made it up. Then kind of, that's kind of terrible if it was like this. He hasn't created it, he's not a creator, he's an assertive creator. So therefore the information, if we're going to take it seriously, has to be something that he's come to from his own experience, his own observation. And this is, of course, this is the point. We don't have to believe a word he says, but he's presenting to you what he sees to be the way the reality is. He's not asking us to believe it. That's why it's not fundamentalist. Normally in religion we think, if I'm right, therefore you're wrong, and you must believe what I'm saying. That's why we all have wars, We try to force other people to believe it. This is insane. This is not the Buddhist deal at all. Everybody has the right and the responsibility to make their own choices. And why? For Buddha, it's kind of an important point, because every single thing that, his view, one of his fundamental views, is that every single mind, every second of every mind, every second of our thoughts and feelings, thoughts and actions of body and speech is a karma, is an action that will bring a reaction in the future in that mind. This mind being not a kind of non-physical continuity of mental moments. So mind and karma really is essentially what we've been talking about. This is kind of the fundamentals of Buddha's view of the universe. There are trillions of minds, and karma is like the word for the law, a natural law that runs the show, that runs the minds. There's no concept of punishment or reward in Buddhism. There's no concept of someone up there pulling the strings, deciding you're this, you're that, you go here, you go there, not like this. No concept. The Buddha says it's what the mind does determines the experiences of that person right now and in the future. This is Buddha's fundamental idea. So then, the other point that's, is that these minds of ours, Buddha says that they've got the potential to be perfect, the potential to be free of suffering and full of happiness, which is a bit of a shock, because we give equal status in our materialist models of the mind to neuroses and good qualities. We're all born this way, you've all got a bit of anger, a bit of depression, a bit of jealousy, a bit of love, a bit of kindness, and hopefully there's a reasonable balance. That's not Buddha's view. He in fact says that all the positive qualities, which are the source of our happiness and the source of our capacity to make others happy, are actually at the core of our being. They are what define us. This is the business, as we mentioned yesterday, about how all beings possess Buddha nature. All it means is this potential to fully develop these good qualities. They are like the very substance of who we are. And what prevents us, what prevents them from fully developing is the presence of the other stuff, the rubbish, the pollution, the neuroses, the miseries, the panics, the fears, the jealousies and the depressions. And we think are normal, but he would say, they ain't normal, baby. They're normal insofar as we've all got them, but what we tend to mean by normal, like I said, is that you'd be weird, you'd be abnormal if you didn't have them. So we cling to our right to be angry and jealous and depressed, even though we know it's a nightmare. Whereas the Buddha says, hey babies, don't be ridiculous. Check inside, you're going to see that they're heartbreaking. And he says, you can rid the mind of them. This is the fundamental point. This is the basis. This is the assumption in all of Buddha's teachings. This is what the business of nirvana is. Like I said, there's not some place like heaven that you have to go to, but you've got to give up boring, you've got to give up sexy samsara to go to boring nirvana. It sounds kind of boring. Not like that. Being in samsara for the Buddha is being caught up in these neuroses, which we believe are who we really are. And we believe they are natural. So even though we know they are heartbreaking, we cling to our right to have them. Why? Because they feel natural, but because we think someone else causes them. It's not my fault. This is absolutely central to the whole view of ego. As Amiyeshi calls ego, it's the self-pity me. Poor me. And you go behind your jealousy, your depression, your fears, your anxiety, your panics. It's poor me. It sounds kind of cruel, because the world is pretty tough and people do terrible things to each other. No one's arguing with that. So Buddha's explanation of karma is an explanation of how come things happen. It's his explanation, but also karma more fundamentally is just what the mind does. Every moment of every thought, action and word is a karma, is an action that will bring a reaction in that mental continuity of mental moments, that mind of ours, which doesn't come from mummy and daddy, isn't the brain, doesn't come from a creator, and can't come from nothing. Nothing can come from nothing. So it's a beginningless continuity of moments of cause and effect, you know. This is the general idea. So being a Buddhist is we're taking this information on board and using it as our working hypothesis, not merely believing it. That's intellectual laziness. It won't get you very far. You're attempting to make it your experience. Slowly. That's the idea. So we're the possibilities. So all the teachings we've been discussing, we can divide them all up into the two wings of the bird. A bird needs two wings, Buddha says, wisdom and compassion. And all the wisdom wing is the nuts and bolts of the mind, how it functions, how to concentrate, how to go to more deep levels of the mind, you know, developing these marvelous skills called meditation, so that we can know the mind well, so that we can be our own therapists, so that we can rid the mind of the nonsense and stop suffering, and indeed stop harming others. This is all the wisdom wing, based upon this concept of karma. Then we put ourselves together and become this marvelous, content, fulfilled, courageous, clear, wise, wonderful human beings, the person we really know we are and want to become. So now we can be of use to others because we realise we're all in the same boat. We're all suffering because we think someone else causes it. We're all with the self-pity me, all blaming everybody else, all stuck in our misery, living in fears and panics and dramas. So our heart breaks then. We realise, how can I leave them behind? You know, I found these methods, they work, so what else can I do? Help others. This is the bodhisattva wing, the compassion wing. So that's what we've been talking about. So, on the one side, we've been talking how the Tibetan, especially the Tibetan way of presenting everything, which of course is my context here, but that's my background, they're my teachers, the Dalai Lama, or his mob, as we say in Australia. This is the way I'm presenting it, coming from that tradition. I haven't studied Zen, I haven't studied Theravada, but the teachings in Japan, in China, in Thailand, in Burma, in Tibet are all coming from the same source. Like, you know, if you go to the Russian Orthodox Church, if you go to some of the Southern Baptist Church, you might initially see similarities, but you can, the core of it's the same. There are variations, obviously. But the packaging of it here, the presentation from the Tibetan tradition. And so, there's this very nice packaging, as I've been talking about, this arcane kind of medieval phrase for this packaging. It's called the lam rim, which means path gradual. Well, it's a kind of quaint phrase for what we would call a course. When you go study music, you're doing a gradual path of music, aren't you? You're engaging in a gradual path of music. Well, we don't say that, we say just do a course, and we get that. Oh yeah, of course, I get it. So you start at the beginning, you go through, and you graduate. Well, that's the same here. Graduation is when you become a Buddha. And so from that point of view, this gradual presentation of the information, according, obviously, like all courses, according to the level of capability as you progress through. Junior school level of practice is all to do with controlling your body and speech, doing what your grandma says. Behave nicely, please. Which means don't harm others. And I mean, like I said before, when we think of Buddhism, we think, oh, meditation, wow, I want to become a Buddhist, I want to meditate. But that's high school, I'm sorry. How could you possibly look into your mind? How can you possibly see what's going on inside you if you've got berserk body and speech? If you can't control yourself, if everything vomits out the mouth, if you're angry and upset and depressed and shoving the cake in and fighting with everybody and looking out there every minute to everybody else, how can you look in here? You can't possibly. Impossible. So you've got to control the body and speech first. Don't underestimate this. We wonder why we can't concentrate when we do our meditation. We wonder why we can't have stable relationships. It's not kidding to say that it's because your body and speech are uncontrolled. This is really so simple. It's embarrassing actually, because we're so into thinking of spiritual Buddhism, meditation, and we wonder why we can't control our minds. We look at your body and speech, look how you moan and complain, and everything that you feel comes out the mouth. You dump it on whoever's there, whether they want to hear it or not. You don't care. Because this is our uncontrolled behaviour, this is how we are. We're all the same. You can listen to other people, look at yourself, blur out the mouth, And then a strong attachment in the mind, the hand goes out, shoves the cake in. Strong attachment, the body goes out, you jump on people. Strong attachment to get things, you take things that don't belong. upset easily, then you go blur and criticise people behind their backs. I mean, this is what we do, you know. And it's quite an awakening to realise that there's body, there's speech, and then there's mind. The mind is the boss. The mind is running the show. The body and speech are just the servants, you know. We give such power to body and speech because we only think we're the body. We don't even, you know. When we think of it this way, it's quite sobering. Okay, I want to control my mind, I better control my body and speech first. If I want to control my mind and do meditation, I'm going to make a decision. I will not vomit out whatever I think when I think it, whoever's around. I will, you know, I have control, not suppress. We only know now two modes of being. We vomit it all out, or we suppress it. We don't even know a third mode, and that is awareness. So awareness is a function of your mind, but awareness at this level is of your body and speech. Control your body, control your speech. It's profound, I tell you, and it's only junior school Buddhists. Haven't even got from bubs yet. Then we can look into our minds. Then we can start to concentrate. Then we can really get someone with our mind be our own therapist. Then we really can investigate this workshop inside us. This is all the wisdom wing. So the first, like we talked, there's some crucial differences in the understanding of what morality is in Buddhism. We all say the same words, morality, ethics, and we all tend to know it means good behaviour, you know. Laws in the country aren't about don't have angry thoughts. No one says that to you. Even in the, okay, maybe in our Christian teachings or whatever, both the Jewish ones too, it's about the thoughts as well. Don't have lustful thoughts, don't have angry thoughts. But it's mainly about behaviour, because that's what impacts upon others. Now if you think about the world, if everybody controlled their body and speech, what a blissful world. I mean, it would be like paradise, quite literally. So body and speech is pretty intense. So junior school. So the difference here in the understanding of morality according to Buddhism, let's say comparing with our materialist view of judges and police and mummies and daddies, who are the ones who call the shots and say don't do this. And the same in Christianity and Judaism or Islam, God says don't do this. Now the crucial question has to be why? So, you know, when I'm a little girl and mummy says don't do that, I'd be a smarty pants and say, why not? And of course her answer would be because I say so. Well, that works as a child. You need that. You've got to have scared mummy, you know, because we're so uncontrolled. But, you know, can you imagine, here I am, you know, nearly dead, 68, close to death, even though I have a long life, still closer to death than birth. And I'm still worried about going near the fire because mummy says I shouldn't. You'd feel sorry for me, wouldn't you? If I don't get at some point, mummy says when I was a little girl, don't get near the fire because I say so, but at some point I ought to learn the logical reason why not to go near the fire, the proper reason, the real reason, because guess what, sweetheart, it'll burn you. So this is the thing. This is what is your morality. Like I said, we can define a negative action as one that harms another. This is pretty reasonable. You can come up with a convention. You know, just do your market research in this room. There'll be 100% agreement about no one likes being lied to, stolen from, bad mouth. So we can deduce that's a negative action. Others don't like it. But in the first stages of morality, when Buddha says, just like Jesus Christ says, don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, very different reason. Jesus Christ says it because God said so. Buddha said, because honey, guess what? It'll harm you. That's the reason. And we have to think of that. And that's the very basis, the beginning of karma. The beginning of taking on board this, you know, this amazing idea that everything you think and do and say has consequences for you. Now we get this in our materialist world when it comes to food, for example. We are all geniuses now about the content of food. What food harms, what doesn't, which one, the nutritional value, the fat, the protein, the this, the that, you know, the sugar, the carbs, we look on the back, oh that's no good, that's got something in it, gluten, I won't eat that. We know this stuff well. Why? Why don't you eat gluten, Robina? Oh, because it harms, you know, I might harm others. Excuse me, you don't eat gluten, it'll harm you, babe. We get this. Why don't you smoke? Well, I can't be a benefit to sentient beings. It's too advanced. You don't smoke because you don't want to get cancer. You don't get into fires because you don't want to get burned. No one says that's being selfish. People think it's common sense. But as soon as it comes to not doing a negative action because it'll harm you, we think that's a bit weird. Because we're not used to thinking this way. So it's quite an interesting concept. The reason that Buddha is saying right at the beginning, junior skill, don't kill, don't lie, don't this, don't that, not because he says so, not even because it harms others. That's later. To be motivated by the wish not to harm others is compassion. That's advanced. At this first level, we have to be motivated by the wish not to harm ourselves. And already this is so grown up, so mature, you really are becoming in charge of your own life. Because right now, if I'm only doing because Mummy says I shouldn't, in other words, I want people to be approving of me. You know, so as long as Mummy doesn't see me do it, I'll get away with it. And that's the way we are. You know, like children. Buddha says karma is a natural law. That whatever you think and do and say just naturally will produce consequences in you. It's a really interesting concept, highly dynamic. Every microsecond of every thought is a seed that you plant in your mind that will produce future experiences for you. So when we're really aware of this idea, you really grow up. You're really accountable. Because who wants suffering? It's so clear. I don't want suffering, I'm sick of it. This is already so grown up. Still to do with you, but already it's amazing. You're really becoming grown up now. You're sick of the suffering. Then you really can grow yourself. And now you start to look at others and you realise they're all in the same boat. What they're doing is harming themselves. That's why you have compassion for them. You know? Like a mother from a junkie kid. Everybody else hates him. You know, he lies, he steals, he's a drain to be around. But the mother, her heart breaks for him. She has compassion for him. Why? Because she can see he's harming himself. When we get that for ourselves, it's easy to have compassion for others. Whereas now the compassion we have is based upon victim. You know, we have compassion for children and animals. That's about it. Innocent victims, we think, you know. Because we have this dualistic idea of punishment, reward, blame, good, bad, all this business. But the view of karma puts us all in the same boat. Every single person is producing themselves. Every person has produced their own happiness. Every person has produced their own suffering. When we can get this for ourselves, we become grown up and mature. Stop blaming others. Stop being a victim. Be accountable. Then we can have genuine, stable compassion for others. In fact, you can't have valid compassion until you have this business for yourself. It's like you can't have it until you have it for yourself. Which means I'm sick of suffering, and finally I know why I'm suffering. My nonsense, my misery, my actions, my neurosis, my negativity, my jealousy. It's like when you finally give up alcohol, when you stop blaming other people. You finally realise I'm sick of the suffering. We all know that's when we act. Same here, exactly the same logic. And of course that demands awareness. And actually it's a sign, you know, we initially think it's a self-blame, but actually it's a sign of having respect for yourself. Finally, I'm sick of harming myself. I'm sick of abusing myself. It means you've got to think you're worthy. And that's scary for us because we don't think we are. You know, it's kind of the irony of ego is we think we're creeps. Ego loves negativity. Ego is completely swimming in negativity. So it really takes courage to grow up, you know. Then we can see others. Then we can have compassion. And it's easy once you've got this. Have compassion for the torturers. Have compassion for the Nazis. Have compassion. You know, the Tibetans have compassion for the Chinese. Not a problem for their mind. You know, I mean, they've killed over the last 50 years. More than a sixth of the population of Tibet's been destroyed. The country's totally destroyed. You know, it used to be such a peaceful, in general, I mean, you know, a few Tibetans killed a few things. They killed a couple of yaks here and there, you know, but pretty much they left everything as it was. They didn't interfere with all the minerals and the chemicals. They didn't have the word environmentalism. It was the most richest, one of the richest environments, which is why, of course, the Chinese communists have just been ripping the place out for the last 50 years, you know. There's you know, starvation and imbalance of all the environment now for the first time ever, you know. The wild animals in Tibet almost weren't wild, because no one hunted them. You know. There was no imbalance of all the creatures. They didn't even kill worms. They didn't kill. So we know, look how we now plague with this creature, plague with that creature, because we're constantly sticking our noses in and ripping, killing all that one, and killing all this lot, and using this lot to kill that lot. It's better to basically leave them alone. So the country's ripped to pieces. Its heart's been ripped out. But the Tibetans, the ones who really had to live in this view, they don't get angry. They understand what's happening. And they have compassion. Like those two young Tibetan nuns I mentioned, spent years in prison, tortured and sexually abused. When they talked about their experiences at the end, and they quietly said, and of course, we had compassion for our torturers. Basically living on karma, because we knew we'd harmed them in the past. But it's a huge view, and this is the essence of the Buddhist view. The fundamental basis of his whole explanation of the universe is based upon this concept of karma. And his view of the mind being not physical and not being created by anybody, coming from previous moments of itself. So this is how we've been talking, isn't it, all week? This is what we've been talking about, unpacking these ideas. So the approach to them, like I've been saying, the approach to them is to listen with our intelligent hat on, not our blind belief hat. Not, oh, I like that and don't like that. It's not a question of liking it. We're trying to investigate the truth. We're trying to see what's true and what's not. This is the point, actually. We understand that when it comes to science, we're very courageous. We know it's about finding truth, which is how we can see how it came away. Certainly in the medieval, from the medieval predominantly, I suppose, well, Christian and the Jewish in Europe, when God ran the show, and like Galileo was practically, what do you call? What they do to all these people, because he dared to say the earth moved around the sun, because you're supposed to believe what you were told, not prove it. So we can see how science, the scientific approach of proving something came out of the religious one. But I would put it this way, that we kind of chuck the baby out the bathwater, and it turned into just being only what you can see with your eyes. So this attitude, the scientific attitude of proving something, that actually is the Buddhist view. But it also includes things that we think can't be proven, such as past lives, future lives, non-physicality. That's why if you ask a Tibetan, are you religious? They'll say, of course I am. But they don't have a view of a creator, so it's a bit of a surprise to have these two ideas together. But no contradiction. So we're the boss. It's up to us. And this is the interesting point. The method as a Christian to become happy is to have faith in God. The method, that's the method. The method, so that's how you get happiness. Because when you die, you get heaven with God. That's happiness. No, I'm not arguing, I'm just saying. So the Buddhist view is the same. The goal is happiness. But very different method. And this is Buddha's point. He's saying the extent to which our minds are caught up in fear, ego grasping, neurosis, jealousy, depression, anxiety, worry, blame, anger, attachment, you name it. The extent to which we're caught up in that stuff is the extent to which two things. We're out of sync with reality, we're living in la la land, and we suffer. So what's interesting, the Buddhist approach to getting wisdom, which seems a bit abstract to us. Do you want wisdom? Well, I'm not sure. You want happiness? Oh yeah. His method for getting happiness is to get wisdom. Because ignorance, the delusions, are the source of suffering. So the method to get happy is to remove the mind of the delusions. Then you get happiness. And you get wisdom at the same time. They come together. It's quite an interesting approach. See this, to see how your attachment, your anger, your fears, your jealousy break your heart, cause intense suffering, not to mention future suffering, but completely cause you to be out of sync with reality. You live in your own little created universe, not in sync with reality. The stronger your anger, the more delusional you are, the more out of sync with reality, the more you see fantasies. The stronger your attachment, the more you see fantasies. The stronger you're jealous, the more you see fantasies. The stronger you're depressed, the more you see fantasies. You're not seeing reality. So, it's often when we read all the Zen literature, all about being here now and seeing things as they are, it all sounds rather abstract to us. We can't quite know how to get there. But this is, what we've been discussing here is the methods for how to get there. Because another way to put that, if you listen to the words of attachment, anger, fears, jealousy, all the neuroses, they're all should not, how dare, if only, why, shouldn't be. It's never about what is. So if you want to say that, talk about being in the moment, all these words which we can easily make very cliches. When you are virtuous, when you are in touch with clarity and kindness and happiness and joy and patience and forgiveness and generosity, you're going to see you're in touch. You're dealing with reality. You're dealing with what is. And listen to the words of anger. How dare you do that? That shouldn't be happening. Why is this happening? If only it weren't happening. Why is this happening? And we agonize forever about why did this happen. Rather than it is happening. Let's see what we can do about it. It sounds so simple, but it's so profound. Because delusions can't bear reality. They're living in what I want as opposed to what is. That's all anger is. Anger is based upon my massive attachment to what I want. And then the extent to which it doesn't get it is the extent of my anger. So it's unbearable. We can't bear seeing this thing, which isn't what I want. That's really what delusions are like. So that's the voices of delusions. So we have so much torture and pain, The person is, when you're in love with somebody and you're living with them, and you're full of this idea of who you think you are and who the relationship is and what they are, and everybody else can see completely clearly that he can't stand you anymore. But he's going to leave you any minute. You can't see it. You're as blind as a bat because there's attachment there, which has got its fantasy. I'm not being mean. Often someone else can look on and see what's going on in a relationship, but when you're inside it, you just can't see it. Because you've got your own fantasy, what you think is happening, rather than the reality of what is happening. And because attachment blinds us, can't see a thing. Can't see what's happening, can't see reality. It's a very interesting take on things, And also the killer about attachment, it seems like pleasure, seems like brings good things. So the example of the fisherman, little boy, attracted like a magnet to fishing since he's tiny, past karmic imprint. So there he is every day going fishing. And because he's got attachment to it, for it, we can see his mind is full of his fantasy of what fishing is. He defines himself as a fisherman. He thinks about fishing. He can't wait to go fishing. He plans it. He thinks of his boat. He fixes it up. He goes here. He goes. Everything's about this, in his mind, the story. So then he's in the boat and he's catching all the fish there in the nets. Never once, all those years, did he ever see suffering fish. Because he had his own fantasy, which he projected onto the fish. But his mother went fishing one time. She couldn't bear fishing. She never said it to him because she was respecting the boy's choice to fish. And all she could see was suffering sentient beings. It was very clear to her that their body language was showing that they desperately wanted to be in the water. You could never see it. That's the killer of attachment. So if you're really attached to, say, sex, of course, unless you go around raping people, you'll use benign methods, won't you, to get the person in the bed. You'll seduce them and be sweet and kind and loving. That's what goes with the territory, isn't it? Unless you're a rapist. So of course the person whom you're seducing thinks you love them. You're being so sweet and kind. But because you're desperate to get them in the bed, it's your method, that's all. They can't see. Blind as a bat. Can't see. Just think, all they can see is the kindness. So when you've got frantic attachment to get what you want, you'll use brutal methods or you'll use nice methods. And there's the nice ones that are really difficult because it looks like kindness. That's why in relationships, when you're in love, it looks so amazing. It feels so amazing. But as long as everybody says there is a love there, the altruism of wanting you to be happy, but it's completely based on attachment, so it's totally unstable. Or as we'd say, it's got strings attached to it. So that's why it's so tricky for us to distinguish between attachment and love, for example. Even the same when it comes to the chocolate cake. Attachment to chocolate cake and liking chocolate cake are actually two completely separate states of mind. It's perfectly reasonable if you know, like if you're an Australian, you like Vegemite. Americans and other people, nobody Greeks as well, think it's disgusting. Can't believe this ugly black stuff. If you're a Tibetan, you like your yak cheese, which is like eating rocks basically. They love their yak cheese. So you can see that there's just a convention in culture, brought up with your Vegemite, with your peanut butter, with your yak cheese. And so on a relative level, would you like some yak cheese? Oh yes, please. Because you like yak cheese. So inevitably you're also going to be attached to it. But we can't see the difference. I love Paros, but I'm really attached to it. So when he gives me up for a younger version, of course the love gets turned off like a tap. Now I hate him. So the love was unstable. Well, the chocolate cake, you know, the chocolate cake or the yak cheese or whatever, you put it in the mouth, and it does trigger a very pleasant feeling. You can't say it isn't. So that's called pleasure. Now pleasure is not attachment. Pleasure is it's a valid state of mind. You're allowed to have pleasure, people. Big surprise to us, we think it's sin, you know. So liking something is not the problem. Pleasure is not the problem. It's the attachment, which is this vampire mind that takes over the whole experience, that grasps at it, that exaggerates its deliciousness, that hankers after it, that manipulates to get it, and then expects pleasure, expects satisfaction to come. That's the lie. But there's still pleasure there. That's fine. Well done. You like it. Oh, you know, you can even argue that it was a good professional chocolate cake, better than that other one. You can still say that. These are all valid facts, conventions. A reasonable chocolate cake, it touches your tongue, it triggers a pleasant feeling. Liking it. All of those are reasonable states of mind. But of course, right now they all come together with the experience of attachment, which is the lie in the mind that completely pervades the rest of the experience. So it's virtually impossible to see the difference. All the sensory experiences we have, you know, it does trigger a nice feeling. You drink that alcohol, it triggers a very nice feeling. But where does attachment kick in? What's the attachment function? Same with the cake, same with the sex. Attachment is lying, exaggerating, expectation, manipulation, greed, never satisfied. So, you know, you'd think if you have one mouthful, especially of a really nice alcohol, it triggers a very pleasant feeling. I remember, like a mouthful of champagne, you know. But look at the way attachment is. As you're drinking that mouthful, so delicious. But this is the point. Attachment is a bottomless pit of dissatisfaction, like a vampire, like empty, just like bereft, nothing. So you're having it, you taste the nice taste, but the mind is desperate and frantic and greedily puts another mouthful in. You taste the pleasure, but you can't get satisfied from it. That's why you keep putting it in, and that's why you become an alcoholic. That's why you become 600 pounds. That's why I become a junkie for sex. Because the more you have, and this is the killer, as my mother used to say, the more you have, the more you get, Bogsy. It's so true, that's the real suffering of attachment. So this is why immense awareness is necessary. Immense, like sophisticated levels of clarity and awareness are necessary. Just to look at our ordinary experiences, to break down all these different things happening in the mind. Like I said before, you know, we have this, I'm watching the breath. And then we say, I'm enjoying chocolate cake. But it's too gross a description. You've got to be much more analytical and break down which part of your mind is doing what. Well, the sensory consciousness is experiencing the pleasure of contact with the cake. The eye consciousness sees the nice shape. You know, it triggers a good feeling in the body. All these are valid, all these are reasonable, you know. But the one of attachment takes over the whole experience. The little hungry, little greedy little girl in there. She gets the mouthful. You see, we think cake makes you happy. We think alcohol makes me happy. So we think about it all the time. We're desperate to get it again. If it did make you happy, this sounds too hilarious, but it's logic. If alcohol were the cause of happiness, which it has to totally believe, then the more you get it, the happier you get. You'd just be in bliss by the third glass, you know. You'd be so blissful. And you'd be content. That's what I mean by blissful. You'd be content. Would you like some more? Oh no, I feel so content. Thank you very much. You had the best sex in the whole world. Would you like some more? No, I'm blissful, thank you. Don't be ridiculous. Even as you're having that one girl, you're waiting for the next one. Because dissatisfaction. That's what we understand that suffering of attachment is really dissatisfaction. It sounds kind of abstract, but it's huge. There's this bottomless pit in there that can't be satisfied. That's why you keep eating, fantasizing that, you know, because there's a physical stomach there. I mean, I know myself when I was a kid, you'd eat and you were stuffed. Because that was the indicator that you were full. Because you didn't notice your mind. You couldn't, you know, because you didn't notice your mind. So you'd stuff yourself but you couldn't eat more. And then you'd sit there exhausted. And you check your mind. You're totally miserable. You're not satisfied at all. There's no satisfaction. There's just more stress, worry, depressed, guilty now, because you're getting fatter, you know. And then you panic. The cake looks disgusting. You'd vomit if you had another mouthful. But you can't wait to go to the toilet for everything to calm down, so you have more cake. Try it again. I'll try it again. Maybe it'll work next time. Buddha saying we've been bashing our heads against brick walls for a few eons, you know, trying to get happy by eating cakes. He says, honey, learn, it won't work. So it's kind of scary, really. We recognise it. Well, the only way we're going to recognise this is by watching our mind like a hawk. And of course, here I'm using Buddha's very clear explanation of attachment, this, that. You know, you probably recognise it, but I mean, Jung doesn't talk this way, Freud doesn't talk this way. This is Buddha's particular take on the mind. So, you know, that's up to you what view you'd like to use. I'm using Buddha's view. I find it quite helpful. And that's, you know, this is, yeah. The more we can see our mind control our behaviour based upon my wish to give up suffering because I'm sick of it, knowing that my mind, my neuroses are the source of my pain, taking that responsibility, then the more I can become content. So contentment doesn't come from eating the cake. Satisfaction doesn't come from following attachment. Satisfaction comes from giving it up. That's the scary part, initially, of course. Because when you no longer crave the alcohol, you're content already. You don't think about alcohol anymore, you're content without the alcohol. But that kind of sounds like boring contentment for us. We'd rather have the drama of falling in love and all the ups and downs and suicides and make-up sex, thinking this, you got, oh well, just that's what comes with the territory, you've got to have suffering to have love, you know. We think this way. So it's like you've got to be an alcoholic in order to get some, you've got to put a bit of drama into your life, you know. In order to have the up, you've got to have the down. We actually think that. We think if you can't, you know, in order to have pleasure, you've got to know it. You've got to be able to have the suffering. That's a bit like saying, well, in order for me to enjoy the pleasure of your hug, you have to first punch me in the nose. So I know that when you hug me, it's called happiness. This is like rubbish. We don't need to know that at all. We kind of know already, you know. And this is how we think it. I think in our materialist views of the mind, because we give equal status to anger, love, compassion, generosity, the so-called good and the so-called bad, we give equal status. We say a person is normal, a bit of all of these, you know, a rounded, well-rounded person. The Buddha's making this kind of shocking statement that they're not equal. In fact, the negative ones aren't even necessary. And this is his whole point. So it needs an immense amount of looking into the mind to check to see if this is true, and then to find the methods for deconstructing and unraveling and slowly changing, ridding the mind of the negative states. And my point, Lynn, is there a dumping ground? No, Lynn's point, Jorge's point. Is there a dumping ground where you put all the junk? No, you don't need to dump it anywhere. It's like when you lose weight. You don't take the fat and put it down the toilet. You understand? It's a really good point. You don't get the fat off. Well, you do these days with the operations, don't you? They do cut it off you. But if you do, if you lose weight in the old-fashioned way, by eating less, it's the best diet, by the way. You just eat less. So anyway, it's a good point. Where does the fat go? You don't put it down the toilet. You don't dumping ground for the fat. It just literally disappears. Same with the delusions. You don't have to bury them, put them aside, just how we think. Don't follow them, suppress them. No. You replace them with truth. You replace them with virtue. Anyway, that's what we've been talking about, isn't it? And then once you can do this for yourself, falling off a log to help others, compassion will come easily. So this is where we talked a little bit about because basically when you go into the compassion wing, you move into university. You're continuing really to work on your mind. You're continuing to rid the mind of the neuroses that in this case now you're seeing are holding you back from connecting with others. You continue to break down the barriers which we have imposed between self and other. So in the wisdom wing, you're kind of backing off and minding your own business. But in the compassion wing, you're involved. You come down from the mountain and you join you get into, you come into the world and you deal with human beings. So really, you could say the best, if you want to just do the wisdom wing, it's best to be on your own, it's best to be quiet, it's best to be in quiet places. But if you want to do the compassion wing, you need to be in New York City or Tel Aviv or Sydney or something. Why? Well, that's where human beings are. I prefer big cities any day. I figure trees are very nice. I'm happy that they're there, but I don't get to see them. It sounds a bit shocking. I think I gave a talk one time, and what's that big place full of rocks in California? People think it's like heaven.
Mixer.
No.
Yosemite.
That's right. I went and gave a talk there. The people who live there, work there. And I've never liked the bush much, I think the bush is nice. I don't really care. I don't mind the sea. And I remember saying some things about Yosemite, and it was like it was sacrilegious. It was like this special place. For me, it was just this bunch of big rocks, It looked all very barren and dry. Anyway, a bit sacrilegious from Yosemite that way. But anyway, the feeling I have, if you're on the bodhisattva wing, you need to be in the midst of where the sentient beings are. Of course, if you can't handle sentient beings, because you haven't done enough of the wisdom wing, then you should back away, go live in the trees again. It's important. But when you're really dealing with your own mind, you've dealt with your own mind to some extent, the city's grist for the mill. Because you go on the freeways, who's in all those cars? They're not driving themselves, believe me. Human beings. You just think of them behind the wheel, and they're just like you, worried, nervous, anxious, self-piteous, worried about what the boss thinks, what the wife thinks, who's sleeping with whom, where is this, too fat, their constipation, worried about every single person behind the wheel. You've just got to think of them, and your heart will break with tears. Not this ugly car making a noise. You see 100-story buildings with all the lights on. Who's in the buildings? Or behind the computers. It doesn't take long to think this way. Human beings like you. And what are they thinking about? Not big grand notions of the meaning of the universe. Too fat, depressed, anxious, worried what the wife's doing, not fair, poor me, jealous. That's the way sentient beings are. Well, you change your view of freeways and buildings then. Who's driving all the taxis in New York City, Sentient beings. You think of it this way, and your mind changes. Whereas instead of, we're so obsessed with it being noisy and ugly and loud, we end up cultivating aversion for people. It's terrible. It's not good at all. We're trying to cultivate compassion for sentient beings. Can't see them as enemies. Okay, according to where you're at. Keep away in the beginning, because you've got to sort your mind out. When we're on the compassion wing, sentient beings are grist for the mill. We're practicing in relation to them, practicing compassion, practicing generosity, practicing forgiveness. You need, the way the Tibetans say it, we need sentient beings in order to cultivate compassion. Compassion is empathy with the pain of others. If you never have sentient beings who are suffering, how can you have empathy with the pain of others? It's not just some gooey feeling in your head. It's real human beings with real suffering. That's what energizes your compassion. And if you're really advanced, you're going to have compassion for your enemies. I remember one Lama, Geshe Soka, he's leaning forward and he said, Bodhisattvas need their enemies. Pretty intense. So one step at a time. And that's why it's crucial to know where we're at. And this is why it's the same as if you're studying music or studying cooking. Because you've got a course, it's structured, it's organised, you always know where you're at, and you have some sense of peace about it. You might be in grade 1, you've already got 12 grades to go. You're not having a panic attack. This is a really important point. We never think this with the spiritual part. We think spiritual is to do with this weird things, you sit down, you have a vision. We don't think of it in a structured way. We don't know where we are on our spiritual path. It's like you're driving from here to, you're going from here somewhere, you have no idea where you're, if you're driving even just from here to, or you're getting the boat from here to Athens. You have no idea where you are, you don't know where you've come from, and you don't know where you're going. That's called being lost. If you're studying music, what grade are you in? Oh, I don't know. You'd be really confused, wouldn't you? Then how can you say you're studying music? You've got to know where you are, you've got to know how far you've come, and you've got to know how far you're going. It gives you some peace. You've got a sense of perspective. Same here. This is why this lamb rim is so practical, because then when you know exactly where you're at, then you can relax. It's not just something hit and miss, Close your eyes, close your legs, whatever you do. Not like that. You've got to know where you've come from, where you are now, and how far you have to go. Then you can be content, delighting the progress of your unit. Right. So, now you can ask me some questions if you like. Maybe new ideas have popped up.